The auction hall buzzed with excitement. $1 million Mercedes trucks gleamed under the spotlight, polished to perfection. A crowd of wealthy businessmen laughed and exchanged smug glances until a ragged man shuffled to the podium. His clothes were torn, shoes worn, and a threadbare coat hung loosely from his shoulders. "I'll take 5 of these," he said, voice steady but calm. Laughter erupted. They thought it was a joke, but when the gavel hit, everything changed. The morning sun spilled across the cracked pavement outside the county auto auction, where gleaming trucks lined up like soldiers ready for parade. The air was thick with the scent of fuel and money, the kind of place where deals were made in millions and smiles hid calculations. Inside the hall, well-dressed bidders in tailored suits sipped coffee, their expensive watches glinting under the fluorescent lights. Then, the crowd shifted. Heads turned as a ragged man stepped through the door. His coat was torn at the sleeves, his boots scuffed to the sole. A faded cap shaded his face, and his hands, calloused and rough, looked like they'd built everything except wealth. His name was Eli Turner, though few knew him. Those who did only remembered the whispers. Used to own a small hauling company, went bankrupt, lost everything. Eli's eyes, however, told another story. Steady, calm, and quietly determined. He walked past the rows of polished bidders, his boots clicking against the marble floor, every step earning him a new round of curious stares. The auctioneer, a tall man with a sharp suit and sharper smile, raised an eyebrow. "Sir," he said with practiced politeness. "May I help you?" Eli nodded. "I'm here for the trucks." The words seemed to hang in the air like an echo no one knew what to do with. A few men snorted, one laughed outright. Another whispered, "Maybe he's lost." Eli ignored them. He found a seat at the very back, close to the exit, and pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket. Inside were scribbles, plans, routes, names of families, and phone numbers. He wasn't there for profit or prestige. He was there for a purpose. As the auction began, the rumble of voices filled the hall. Numbers flew like bullets. 200,000, 250, 300, until the price of each Mercedes truck reached heights that made jaws drop. And yet Eli didn't blink. He just watched, listened, waited. To the businessmen, he was invisible, a speck in their glossy world of ambition. But behind his calm expression, his mind worked with quiet precision. He had spent months gathering promises, small donations and partnerships from local shop owners, charities, and a nearby church. Every penny had been accounted for. He wasn't there to buy trucks for himself. He was there to change lives. Still, the mockery was relentless. One bidder leaned back, smirking. "Hey, old man," he called out. "You planning to pay with pocket lint?" A few chuckles followed. Even the auctioneer allowed himself a grin. Eli looked up at them, his voice calm, almost gentle. "No," he said, "with purpose." The laughter only grew louder. But Eli didn't care. He'd seen enough of life to know that people laugh at what they don't understand. And soon, when his turn came, that laughter would turn to silence. The auction room buzzed with noise. Paddles waving, voices calling out numbers, pens scratching across notepads. The tension was electric, thick with competition and ego. Everyone in that room wanted a piece of those shining Mercedes trucks lined up outside. Trucks that symbolized power, success, and status. And then came the moment that froze the entire hall. The auctioneer's gavel tapped against the podium. Next lot, 5 brand-new Mercedes-Benz Actros trucks. Minimum bid, $200,000 each. Who'll start? Before the usual bidders could jump in, a single hand rose from the back row. Every head turned. Eli Turner stood there, ragged coat, sun-worn skin, boots coated in dust. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room with unexpected confidence. "I'll take 5, he said. For a moment, silence reigned. Then laughter exploded like a wave crashing through the hall. One man doubled over, slapping his knee. Another shouted, "5? You mean 5 minutes to get out of here?" The auctioneer chuckled awkwardly, trying to maintain decorum, but the smirks and whispers around him only grew louder. Eli didn't move. He stood tall, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on the stage. The mockery bounced off him like rain on steel. "Sir," the auctioneer said, still half amused, "perhaps you misunderstood. These are premium Mercedes heavy-duty trucks. Each costs over $200,000. Eli nodded once. "I understand. I said 5. The laughter started again, but this time a few people didn't join in. Something in his tone, calm, unwavering, felt different. One of the younger bidders, a man in a tailored gray suit, leaned toward his friend. "Is he serious?" He whispered. The friend shrugged. "Can't be. Look at him." But Eli's expression didn't match their assumptions. His face carried no arrogance, no bravado, just quiet conviction. He reached into his worn satchel and pulled out a small folder. Nothing fancy, just weathered papers bound with a rubber band. He placed it on the counter beside him. "All my documentation is here," he said softly. "Proof of backing. Letters of intent. Every truck has a purpose." The auctioneer's grin faltered. "Purpose?" Eli met his gaze. "For people who've lost everything. Families, farmers, small-town workers. These trucks will help them rebuild, deliver supplies, create jobs. We're not buying them for luxury. We're buying them for hope." The crowd's laughter slowly faded into a stunned silence. The only sound was the steady patter of rain against the window panes. Even the auctioneer hesitated, caught between disbelief and something else. Respect, maybe. He cleared his throat. "And you have the means to proceed?" Eli gave a small smile. "Yes, sir. Every cent accounted for. The community stands behind this." He wasn't bluffing. Weeks of effort, late nights, and countless rejections had led him here. The hall that once roared with mockery now sat in uneasy quiet. For the first time that morning, those businessmen saw Eli not as a beggar, but as something far more powerful, a man with purpose. And when the auctioneer raised his gavel again, no one dared laugh. When the laughter died, the auction hall felt different. Uneasy, like a storm had just passed, but the air was still heavy with electricity. The men who had mocked Eli now sat straighter, watching him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his confidence shaken. "Well, Mr. Turner," he said, the mockery gone from his voice, "if you truly intend to claim 5 trucks, we'll need confirmation of your—" Before he could finish, Eli stepped forward, his boots echoing on the marble floor. He opened the worn folder he carried, hands steady despite the whispers around him. Inside were documents, letters, and handwritten notes. He laid them gently on the auctioneer's desk. "These," he said quietly, "are letters of backing from the community. Farmers, shop owners, a church, and a transport co-op from 3 towns over. We've all chipped in." The auctioneer frowned, scanning the papers. Around him, the crowd shifted, murmuring in disbelief. This can't be," one man muttered. "He's bluffing." But Eli wasn't bluffing. Every signature, every stamp was real. The mayor's office had verified it days ago. Eli continued, his voice calm but full of conviction. "You see, gentlemen, when my company went under years ago, it wasn't greed that ruined it. It was the storm that destroyed half this county. Families lost homes. Farmers lost their crops. The roads were closed for months. I lost everything, too." He paused, looking around the room, at the expensive suits, the diamond watches, the polished shoes. "But while I was down, people fed me, helped me, gave me a reason to keep going. I promised myself, if I ever got the chance, I'd repay them. Not with words, but with work." He pointed toward the 5 trucks gleaming under the auction lights. "Those trucks aren't for me. They're for rebuilding. For hauling food to small stores that can't afford transport. For taking medicine to folks who live too far from town. For every man and woman who thinks they're forgotten. Silence. The kind of silence that makes you realize the world just shifted a little." One of the businessmen, the same one who had laughed the loudest, lowered his eyes. Another crossed his arms, visibly uncomfortable. The auctioneer, who had once looked down at Eli, now regarded him with something close to admiration. "Mr. Turner," he said slowly, "this is highly unconventional." Eli nodded. "So was losing everything and starting over. But it's the unconventional that changes lives, isn't it?" The crowd didn't know what to say. What could they? For the first time, their wealth, their status, All felt small compared to this man who stood before them with nothing but truth and courage. After a long pause, the auctioneer raised the gavel again, his voice quieter now. "Very well," he said. 5 trucks. For Mr. Turner." The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and just like that, the ragged man who everyone laughed at became the most respected man in the room. When the auction ended, the room slowly emptied, but the story was only beginning. Eli remained by the trucks, running a weathered hand over the polished chrome. Each reflection carried a memory of fields destroyed by storms, of nights spent hungry, of the quiet prayers of people who refused to give up. A few of the businessmen lingered at the back, whispering, but Eli didn't pay them any mind. He wasn't here to prove them wrong. He was here to do what he promised. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. The ragged man who bought 5 Mercedes trucks was on everyone's lips. But while most were talking, Eli was working. The next day, under the bright sun, the trucks rolled into the small town of Maple Ridge. Children ran alongside, laughing as dust rose behind the wheels. Old men stood outside the cafe, tipping their hats, disbelief written all over their faces. Eli stepped down from the first truck, still in his torn jacket, the same one everyone had once pitied him for. But now it looked almost noble, like a badge of honor earned through hardship. He waved at the small crowd. "These trucks," he said, his voice strong but humble, "belong to all of you." Gasps rippled through the townsfolk. A woman holding a baby stepped forward. "What do you mean, Eli?" He smiled softly. "We're starting a community transport line. 1 truck will deliver produce from the farms so they don't rot before reaching the market. Another will help rebuild homes for families still living in shelters. The 3rd will carry school supplies for the children in the next county. The 4th is for the local clinic, medicine, equipment, anything they need. And the 5th?" He paused, eyes glistening. "The 5th will be for emergencies, for anyone, anytime, no questions asked." The crowd was silent, moved beyond words. Then slowly applause began. Hesitant at first, then swelling into something powerful. Tears streamed down faces hardened by years of struggle. A young mechanic named Luis stepped forward, his hands still covered in grease. "Eli," he said, voice trembling, "I'll drive one. No pay needed, just let me be part of it." Others followed, a farmer, a nurse, a retired soldier. Each one offered something: time, skill, fuel, even spare parts. It was as if Eli's kindness had unlocked something that had long been sleeping inside them all. By sunset, the once quiet town was buzzing with purpose. Trucks were being painted with the words "Hope on Wheels." Children helped decorate them with ribbons. People laughed together, cried together, not out of sorrow this time, but from a feeling that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be better. Eli stood a few steps away, watching it all unfold. For years he'd been invisible, a man people looked past. But now, as he watched a community come alive, he realized something profound. He didn't just buy 5 trucks. He reignited 5 towns' worth of hope. Weeks passed, and the once-forgotten town of Maple Ridge began to transform. The dusty roads now echoed with the rumble of the Hope on Wheels trucks, each one a symbol of something far greater than steel and rubber. They carried life, they carried second chances, and at the heart of it all stood Eli, the man who once had nothing, now giving everything. Every morning, he'd sit on the porch of the old repair shop, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, watching the trucks drive out one by one. Farmers waved. Kids shouted his name. People he'd never spoken to before now stopped just to thank him. But Eli didn't crave the praise. What mattered to him was the light returning to people's eyes, the kind that hardship had once stolen. One late afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the shop. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, the same salesman who had once laughed at Eli during the auction. His confident stride was gone, replaced by something else: humility. "Mr. Thompson," he said quietly, removing his sunglasses, "I came to see for myself." Eli nodded, offering a small smile. "You've come a long way for that." The salesman looked around, at the children chasing each other with paintbrushes, at the nurses loading boxes of medicine into the trucks, at the farmers waving from the fields. "You changed this place," he murmured. "They said you were a crazy old man, Guess they were wrong? Eli chuckled softly. Maybe I was crazy. But sometimes that's what it takes to believe in people again. The man hesitated, then handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter from the Mercedes company itself. They had heard about what Eli did, the trucks, the community movement, the impact, and wanted to sponsor his project across neighboring towns. Eli's eyes widened, his hands trembling as he read. They want to help? Yes, the salesman said, smiling for the first time. They said it reminded them what business should really be about. People. Eli looked out at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in gold and amber. His heart swelled with gratitude, not for the recognition but for the chance to keep giving. Later that evening, the townsfolk gathered around the trucks for a small ceremony. Kids held candles, and someone had painted a sign that read, "Thank you, Eli, for believing in us." As music filled the air, a little girl tugged on Eli's sleeve. "Mr. Eli," she asked innocently, "why did you buy all those trucks if you didn't need them?" Eli bent down, meeting her curious eyes. "Because, sweetheart," he said softly, "the world changes when you use what you have to lift others. I didn't buy trucks. I bought hope." The crowd fell silent, the words settling deep in their hearts. Then slowly, applause rose. Gentle at first, then thunderous, echoing through the night. And for the first time in years, Eli looked up at the stars. The same stars he'd once stared at when he had nothing. And smiled. He'd been rejected by the world once, but now he'd given that same world a reason to believe again. His name didn't just stand for generosity. It stood for the truth that kindness, no matter how small, can move mountains.